Welcome to Econ with Wes. In this video, we are going to look at shifts of the supply curve, and we are going to look at the factors which causes a shift in supply. Let's have a look at what a shift of the supply curve would look like on a diagram. Okay, so if there was an increase in supply for whatever reason, and we will look at the reason shortly, if there was an increase in supply, the supply curve will shift to the right-hand side from S to S1, okay? This would be an outward shift. Now, if there was a decrease in supply for whatever reason, then the supply curve will shift inwards to the left-hand side from S to S2, okay? So in terms of illustrating an increase or a decrease in supply on a diagram, an increase in supply will cause the supply curve to shift to the right-hand side, but if there was a decrease in supply, then the supply curve will shift to the left-hand side, okay? So let's have a look at the causes, the factors which can cause an increase or a decrease in the supply curve. In supply generally. Now, these are known as the determinants of supply. Now, the main one is the cost of production. The cost of production is the cost of producing the product for the firm, okay? So basically, cost of the production would be the cost of buying the factors of production. And if you remember, the factors of production are land, labor, and capital, okay? So basically, the entrepreneur, the enterprise, has to buy natural resources, they have to pay for human resources, and they have to buy capital resources in order to produce their product, okay? So if the cost of any of the natural, human, and man-made resources increases, okay, so let's just say that the cost of production increases, this means that firms are going to be less willing and less able to supply the product because it costs them more to make, okay? So if the cost of production increases, firms will be less willing and able to supply products, and therefore the supply curve will shift to the left-hand side. However, if the cost of production decreased, okay, if it became less expensive to make a product, as a result, firms are going to be more willing and more able to supply products. So then the supply curve will shift to the right-hand side as a result, okay? So the cost of production, let's just take an example there. Let's just say oil, let's just say the cost of oil has decreased. Well, if any firm that buys oil in order to produce their product, if the price of oil decreases, this in turn will decrease the cost of production. And as a result, firms are going to be more willing and more able to supply products. Okay, so just to recap, if the cost of production increases, firms are going to be less willing and able to supply the product, so supply will decrease. But if the cost of production decreases, then firms are going to be more willing and able to supply the product, so supply would increase as a result. Okay, other determinants of supply are indirect taxes. Now, there will be a video on indirect taxes in the future, okay, but indirect taxes are basically a tax on spending. Okay, now students often get confused here because they think it's the consumers that take on the burden of the tax. Now they do, but indirectly. Okay, initially it is the firm that actually pays the tax, and then they can pass on the burden or some of the burden of the tax to the consumer. Okay, so it's the firm that pays the tax initially. So therefore, if the firm pays the tax, okay, that means as a result, the cost of production will increase. And as a result of that, firms' willingness and ableness to supply products will decrease, and therefore there will be an inward shift of the supply curve to the left. Okay, subsidies. Again, there will be a future video on subsidies, but subsidies is money given by the government to firms. And they don't just give money to any firm, they normally give money, a subsidy to a firm who is producing a necessity product that will benefit households and consumers. Okay. There are other reasons to why governments give firms subsidies, and we will explore that further in a future video. But basically, if the government gives a firm a subsidy, okay, it means that the cost of production decreases for the firm. The firm are receiving money from the government, therefore, the cost of producing the product will decrease. And as a result, if the cost of production decreases, then firms are going to be more willing and able to supply products. So, therefore, supply will shift to the right, and there will be an increase in supply, an outward shift of the supply curve. Changes in technology. So for an example, if there was advancements in technology, if technology became faster, the introduction of robotics in a factory, etc., this is going to, these are all going to result in firms being able to supply more products. Okay, so improvements in technology, advancements in technology is going to lead to an increase in supply, and therefore the supply curve will shift outwards to the right-hand side. The final determinant of supply is natural factors, such as weather conditions. So, for an example, if there was a poor harvest or if there was heavy flooding and that destroyed crops, for an example, such as wheat and barley, as a result, firms are going to be less willing and able to supply products because they have been damaged. Okay, so if there has been a poor harvest or heavy flooding, that would result in the supply curve shifting to the left-hand side because firms are going to be less able to supply products if they have been damaged by natural factors. Now, conversely, there can be good harvests, okay? There can be good weather conditions, which means that more natural resources, more products are grown, and as a result, firms are going to be more willing and able to supply products, and therefore the supply curve will shift outwards to the right-hand side. I hope you enjoyed that video on the factors which can cause an increase or a decrease in the supply of a product by firms. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Look out for future videos, and thank you very much for watching.